Quick warning, the story does include a fight scene which does include blood. With that out of the way, let's get started. Title, El Loco. Absolutely not, Sir Garrick commanded, his breath making clouds in the cool, if not chilly, morning English countryside air. He deigned to send a cool glare at Bartholomew from the side of his eye as he fastened the saddle on his horse. It was still mostly dark out, but he was preparing for a hunt, as were most of the other experienced knights in the castle. The target animal was a wild boar, or so the rumor mill around Redstone Castle had postulated. Lord Harwin's wife, Lady Millicent, was due to give birth any day now, and the lord of the castle wanted to feast to commemorate the event. Please, Sir Garrick, I'm capable. I'm the best swordsman from the house of Bartholomew in a century, Bartholomew argued back. I'll not have a wet behind the ears knight muck up this hunt. I've said no to more experienced knights, all of whom have had months, if not years of experience on you. In a single month, you've managed to break every single unspoken rule of knights. You adorn yourself in a completely white cloak and tunic, which have to be washed every night to stay barely white. You self-opted to wield two swords instead of the traditional sword and shield, or even a spear and shield. But perhaps the pinnacle of it all is that you insist on having people call you by your family's sigil. Nicknames are earned, not self-given. What gives you the gall to question my order? The best swordsman from a house of shoeshiners and lickspittles considered me scared, one of the other knights accompanying Sir Garrick and Lord Harwin snarked. Shut your mouth, Raoul, Bartholomew snapped back. The tip of his ears were growing red with shame. You've barely been a knight for 6 months. You're not even the best knight in your family, so why do you keep on calling yourself Hawk of House Farrington? That's your older brother, dunghead. Bartholomew didn't need to be reminded every 20 minutes that the house from which he came, House Bartholomew, did not carry the best of reputations upon their shoulders. And yet I've bested every single knight my age in this castle, Raoul responded, striding up to Bartholomew and getting in his face, but not touching. And I want an attorney. My brother could not claim as much when he was my age. As a matter of fact, can your pathetic self claim as much? I thought as much. Mutt. It's hound. Or would you rather I call you vulture, interloping Enough! Sir Garrick barked. I shall not have you two quarreling like craven thieves. You are both knights sworn to Redstone Castle and her lord and lady. Raoul, back to your horse, and Bartholomew, back to the castle. While we are gone, you are to stand guard outside of Lady Millicent's chambers, along with the knights in training, Edwin and Stanley. I'm sure you're more than capable of guarding against the morning fog, or is that too much for the great hound Bartholomew of House Bartholomew? Bartholomew fully flushed and stared at his shoes while Raoul and a few of the other knights snickered. Good. Now to your post, Bartholomew. Time marches on, and we must get going, Sir Garrick said, mounting his horse and guiding it out of the courtyard. Yeah, later, mutt, Raoul snipped at Bartholomew as he led his own horse after Sir Garrick and the other knights. Dunghead, Bartholomew swore underneath his breath as he stomped his way back towards the castle. The chainless shirt he wore over a padded white tunic, the under various plates of armor, clinked with every movement. By the time Bartholomew arrived back at the castle, he was already slightly sweating, and the sun had begun to peek out over the horizon. He stormed back into the main hall of the residential quarters. The suits of armor that lined the hallway seemed to leer at Bartholomew as he passed, as if letting him know that he did not belong there. As a matter of fact, it was all too clear to Bartholomew. But nonetheless, he soldiered on, adjusting his chest plate, adorned with the House Bartholomew sigil, the dog, into a more comfortable position. At the end of the hall were a pair of ornate doors that led to the lavish quarters of the lord and lady. Lady Millicent was probably inside with her various handmaidens. Edwin, of House Easton, and Stanley, of House Fletcher, stood waiting for Bartholomew at the end of the hall. The two knights in training were even more inexperienced than Bartholomew, and it showed. Their armor looked as though it had been put on in complete darkness, regardless of their lack of decorum, though Bartholomew took his place in between the two of them, his back to the door, facing towards the empty hallway. Sup, Tholo, Stanley chimed up, with Edwin nodding his head. Shut your trap. I'm on the mood, Bartholomew snapped back. Jeez, someone's touchy. What, did you not get allowed on the hunt? Bartholomew clenched his fist and jaw. It would be so easy to turn, just give it to Stanley. Bartholomew wasn't the tallest of... Bartholomew was not the tallest, at an even 5'10", but Stanley was a good 4 inches shorter. Bartholomew breathed in deeply. Violence was not the answer. He heard Stanley and Edwin chattering in the background, but he looked towards the end of the hallway and blocked them out. They continued chattering for a few more minutes, and all the while Bartholomew was breathing in and out deeply, trying so desperately to control his anger. Then, they stopped suddenly. Not that Bartholomew noticed. His concentration was still on his breathing. Bartholomew did notice, however, when Stanley and Edwin started speaking again, although he missed the frantic edge in their tones. That was until they started shaking him. "What?" Bartholomew snapped at them after a few seconds. "Listen!" they both practically screamed at him. "There's nothing to hear." And then Bartholomew heard it. A yell, likely a profanity, but the oddest thing was that it didn't sound like the Queen's English. It was almost as if... No, they wouldn't. Right? Actually, yes, they would. And who can blame them? Mary Queen of Scots was just executed. The local rumor mill had propagated that a Spanish armada was massing and preparing to sail up the English Channel. But Bartholomew supposed a few preliminary raids were not completely irrational. Bartholomew could hear Stanley and Edwin start hyperventilating next to him. He shot each of them a quick glance. They were not ready for this in the slightest way. Bartholomew quickly spun around and delivered a swift slap to each of their faces. "Pull yourselves together, damn it!" Bartholomew roared. "We have a goal. Protect that door. At all costs." Bartholomew jabbed a finger at the open door in which they were standing in front of. "What do you think happens if they get through us, I can't do this. Please don't make me do this," Stanley cried. Tears were running down his face. Edwin stood in the background, but his expression perfectly mirrored Stanley's. For a few more seconds there was silence as the noise of men shouting grew ever closer. "Then leave," Bartholomew said suddenly. "What?" "Leave," Bartholomew responded. He quickly strode over to the statue nearest to the door and pushed one of the stone blocks he was standing on to the side. Hidden underneath was a small hole, but large enough that a man could fit through. Most English castles had a few trapdoors and a few hidden passageways for emergency escapes. Redstone Castle was no different. "You two, in there, quick," Bartholomew barked at the two knights in training. "Follow the passage until you get to a T, and then take a left. It should bring you guys up behind the stables. Grab a horse and go get Sir Garrick and the rest of the knights." For a second, the two seemed frozen before they snapped into action. Edwin went first down the hole, followed by Stanley, who paused. "Hey, Tholo, please don't die." Bartholomew spared a quick smile. "I won't. And remember, first left." Stanley nodded and disappeared into the tunnel. Bartholomew heaved the stone block and suit of armor back into place before going back to stand in the middle of the hallway with his back to the door. Truth be told, Bartholomew was just as nervous as Stanley and Edwin. His hands were quivering, and no amount of shaking or clenching them was going to change that. But he couldn't show fear. Not now. Not ever. He was a knight, damn it. What was that one part of the vow again? Act strong when you are weak. Bartholomew muttered weakly underneath his breath, as his hands found their way to the arming swords at his side. His left hand rested on the blade split, while his right hand gripped the handle of Reaver. Were the names presumptuous? Perhaps, but shoot for the stars and you'll land in the heavens, they said. Bartholomew reached behind him and banged on the door. "Lock it, and don't open it for anyone," Bartholomew shouted. The door was thick, and for a moment he feared that they may not have heard him. The loud thud indicated the bar lock had been set into place, and not a moment too soon as the sound of men shouting rounded the corner. A party, 12 men strong, rounded the corner. They were lightly armored, but carried rapiers and bucklers, which clued Bartholomew that they were not a heavy infantry group. Something that he was immediately grateful for. Now he would be swept aside like a leaf before a storm. More like a leaf before a wild animal. "Halt!" Bartholomew shouted, but he didn't draw his swords yet. "Identify yourselves." A large man stepped forward, the leader of the group, Bartholomew summarized. Sorry, kid, but orders are orders. Now step aside, boy, and we'll make this quick. No, Bartholomew shouted in defiance, finally drawing Split and Reaver. I am Bartholomew of House Bartholomew, sworn knight of Redstone Castle. I am the White House of House Bartholomew, and I swear it, that in this very hallway, all 12 of you shall taste the kiss of death at the edge of my blades. Your hands are shaking, kid. Bartholomew's hands, and by extension his swords, were in fact shaking, and none too minutely. The man shook his head, which slightly mussed up his shoulder-length, glossy brown hair. We gave you a chance, kid. I'm sorry I had to come to this. The man turned back to his men and nodded his head towards Bartholomew. They nodded and began to walk forward. They weren't particularly in any order or fashion, but it was enough that they wouldn't all engage Bartholomew at the same time. Bartholomew breathed in. This was it. The moment of truth. Of life or death. Of success or failure. Of a vow kept or a vow broken. Split rose, its sharp point above Bartholomew's head and slightly to the right. It waited still as stone, except for the small tremor that traveled up from its wielder. As the first Spanish man stepped forward, the blade froze once more. Then, as quick as a snake, Split darted forward and down, cleaving the air before it as it rushed towards its target. But then, a flash, and an imposing piece of metal rose to meet it, deflecting away from allowing the man opposing Split's wielder to meet the end. But this was all a part of the ruse, you see. Split was not meant to deliver death. No, that was the other's task, and it seemed as though the man didn't realize this until it was far, far too late. Reaver rose from Bartholomew's shadow and into the man's abdomen. The rich red color of lifeblood splattered onto Bartholomew, staining the white he wore and dotting his face with beads of red. Bartholomew straightened out, letting a shaky sigh out of his lungs. Split and Reaver were still shaking, but Bartholomew thought there was no stopping now. Death awaits any who proceed towards the door, but I welcome you to try. I am only a man, but I have a vow to keep, so continue forward, heretics, and face the end. Bartholomew's words were met with silence, before there was a collective of enraged shouts as the men rushed forward. Bartholomew tapped Split and Reaver together, before swinging once again, and 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 again. The floor was now covered in bodies, and every visible patch of clothing Bartholomew wore was stained red. All that was left was the man Bartholomew had spoken to previously. He quietly swore and drew his rapier, before holding his buckler close to his chest. They were just sailors. What a waste of life. But I suppose this is war. Bartholomew didn't quite know who the man was speaking to. He just gave a short nod. The man rushed forward with a shout, his rapier whipping forward, its edge careening towards Nico's flesh. It was just barely deflected with Reaver, but the following bashing of a buckler into Bartholomew's left shoulder could not be blocked. Bartholomew staggered backwards, but recovered quickly, and flicked Split upwards, taking the man's left eye. The man roared and stumbled back, but the space gained had not been for free, as Bartholomew felt a pain just above his mouth, to right underneath his eye. It hurt, but it was not debilitating, so Bartholomew powered forward and capitalized on the man's momentary pause and concentration. Split found a chink in the man's armor and dug into his thigh, bringing the Spaniard to his knees. Reaver flicked back and forth, rendering the man's arms a null threat. The man panted as he stared up at Bartholomew from the spot on the floor. Some white hound, the man spat, gesturing to Bartholomew, whose cloak and tunic were now completely red. You're completely mad. A mad wolf. Any last words? Bartholomew asked as he raised Reaver. I'm not sorry, Lobo Loco. Bartholomew nodded and Reaver fell. The man spoke no more. A Lobo Loco, huh? Bartholomew's head whipped up. There stood Sir Garrick. The knight surveyed the messy scene. I suppose the name suits you, Wolf of House Bartholomew. You've done Redstone and her lord and lady a great service. It will not be forgotten. Something felt off, so I came back a bit earlier than the rest. There could be others around, but I got it from here. You've done well. Take a rest. Bartholomew nodded as he hobbled over to the wall and sat down heavily. Splint Reaver was tossed at his sides. Now that the adrenaline was out of his system, he was really quite tired, but on the bright side, he now had something of morale. To any of you guys who got this far, thank you so much for listening. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful day.